Today, trade is one of the most important aspects of the world. It brings knowledge and technology all across the globe, and since I'm still not over this topic, I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about some of the oldest and greatest routes of trade that have connected the world for centuries. Although trade has probably been around for thousands or even millions of years, it probably wasn't a highly organized system and would sometimes be a one-time deal kind of thing. One of the oldest known records of trade in the old world was in Sumer between the 4th and 3rd millennium BC. The Sumerians would trade food and jewelry with other Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations. The Egyptians had trade routes through the Red Sea where they would import spices from East Africa and Arabia. While researching for this video, I found out that spices come from the Latin word species, which means an item of special value. So whenever I talk about spices, I will most likely be referring to the actual edible flavoring. But I could also be talking about rare items, just to throw you off. It is believed that the first extensive trade routes were up and down the great rivers, which were the Nile, Tigris, and the Euphrates, along with the Indus and Yellow River. The reason they were the most traveled was because water is much faster and more efficient than land is. Because of these great rivers, it led to the greater need for faster boats to carry items from one place to another, and stronger connections with civilizations along the rivers. The Eastern Mediterranean would become the first region to develop maritime trade, which was traversed by the Egyptian and Minoan Cretan. Then trade would expand through the islands in the Mediterranean and the North African coast. Although trade via land wasn't favorable, it was something people would sometimes have to do. For this, people would use camels due to their ability to traverse great lengths without the need for water. Two of the most important species sprang up around 1000 BC and were the Arabian and Bactrian camels. The Arabian camel is the one you most likely think of when you think of camel, while the Bactrian camel is the weird, strange looking cousin that has two humps and is much shorter. The way camels survive so long without water is because they can drink over 20 gallons, which is then stored in their bloodstream. Their humps are also important because they can retain fats that can be used later when there is little to no food available. Greater trading connections were eventually established during the time of Alexander the Great because of his vast empire. However, it wouldn't be until around 300 BC that we would see the creation of a strategic city that came at the hands of one of Alexander's generals, which would be Seleucus I Nicator. Seleucus founded a city at the northeastern tip of the Mediterranean and named it after his father Antioch, while also honoring himself by naming its port Seleucia. Eventually, the city would be one of the areas where many famous routes would cross through in order to deliver the various imports and exports of the old world. One of the most important parts of trade was its ability to spread influence all across the globe. Through trade, many ideas and various forms of technology would spread, which would be the reason as to why humanity has advanced so much as it has today. Things such as medicine, technology, knowledge, cultures, and literature, along with other things, spread much faster through trade. And nothing did this better than these two infamous routes. You've all probably heard of the famous Silk Road somewhere around elementary school, and there's a reason as to why it's so famous. It connected the East and West through a series of routes that would be used by many people, from Romans in the Far East to the Chinese in the Far West, from high up in Mongolia all the way down to Somalia. Fun fact time! The Silk Road wouldn't be known by its famous name until the late 1800s, and it would be named by a German geographer known as Ferdinand von Richthofen, and he dubbed it the Seitenstraße, which literally translates to the Silk Road. Just thought you should know. Back to the video. As to when it was first used officially was during the Han Dynasty, which lasted from 206 BC to 220 AD. That's 446 years, but that's beside the point. The reason I say officially in quotations is because it is possible that the Silk Road had been used further back by a smaller amount of people. Some of the most important exports/imports were paper, gunpowder, and especially silk. Silk was so important and valuable that it would sometimes even be used as currency and equaled precious minerals such as gold. The reason it was so valuable, other than it just looking great, was because there was only one place you could get it, and that was China. And if you exclusively own something, you're probably gonna get rich. Paper was another important export from China because it was better for using when it came to writing important documents. Although papyrus was used, its uneven surfaces and hardened material made it only useful for scrolls that were opened very so often as to limit the amount of cracks that showed up. Finally, there's gunpowder, the substance that would create greater and deadlier weapons over the many years. China, once again, was the only one who knew how to make it. But its recipe eventually traveled the Silk Road, allowing many to use its power for their own military needs. Now, we can't just move on from the Silk Road without at least mentioning the famous Venetian merchant known as Marco Polo. Marco Polo traveled to China when he was 17 years old and landed in Xanadu, Mongolia, where he served the great Kublai Khan for 24 years. When he finally returned, he would become Europe's basis for knowledge on Asia. The reason no one believed him was because most Europeans hadn't traveled that far, and his stories seemed so magnificent that it could seem sometimes like fantasy. It's like if I told you, hey, did you know that a humpback whale was found in the middle of the Amazon rainforest? Or that it's illegal to build a sandcastle in Heraclea, Italy? You wouldn't believe me, right? But it's true. Look it up. I ain't got nothing to hide. Anyways, moving on. As time passed, a new route emerged that once again allowed easier and faster access to products and supplies. This route would be accessed, however, via water. The spice routes officially began near the end of the 15th century. Before this, Europe could only get their hands on exotic goods through the Ottoman and Venetian monopoly of the seas, because whenever you have the military power to suppress the rest of the subcontinent, you're most likely going to abuse that power. But luckily, as technology advanced and better ships were built, the whole of Europe could finally make it past the Venetian and Ottoman Empire, along with a whole other ocean that would lead to the deaths of millions. But that's another story. The route stretched from the west coast of Japan all the way to Europe. The reason the route is named after spices is because the most sought after products were pepper, cloves, and nutmeg. The latter two could only be found in the Moluccas area in Indonesia. The main profiteers from the spice routes would be the English and the Dutch, for they controlled much of the Indonesia, allowing them to hold another monopoly on the highly sought after items. The reason I wanted to make this video was because I guess I've just been so fascinated by the way people managed to trade back in the day when technology was so much less advanced than it is today. I mean, would you really prefer staying out in the open for multiple weeks on end just to get to a place you could drive to in a few hours? Seriously, I mean, back then you would end up dying of dysentery or some deadly disease or get robbed by bandits on your way to your destination. There are tons more interesting trade routes like the tin route that I didn't get to mention, but I just wanted to cover the two most important ones I found along with the roots of ancient trade. Oh, and if you're wondering when the next episode of the Essex is coming out, all I can say is soon. And by soon I mean I haven't started recording yet, but I did finish the research, so that's good. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, you can leave a like if you want, that's up to you, and only you. Ciao!